Boy, the year goes by quickly, doesn't it? Today is the last day of 2023. 12/31/23. Or 123/123. It's kind of interesting. It's also interesting that on this last day of the year, a day when a lot of us are thinking about New Year's resolutions, that this particular topic pops up. That wasn't planned, just purely coincidence. But it's probably a good thing. And looky who just walked in the door. It's Ken and Janice Stegall, for those of you that may not know them. Ken, I want you to know I wouldn't do this for anybody, but if you want to teach, I'll defer the floor to you. It's sure good seeing y'all, and Ellie Kate as well. Well, anyway, thank you for being here. When we're talking about New Year's resolution, if you don't do that kind of thing, I'll give you one that you need to start with, and that is read your Bibles in 2024 every day. And as you know, when Ken and Janice were here, we started a tradition at Woodland Oaks of trying to read through your Bibles every year, and we'll have a little celebration here. I think it's being planned for February 3rd. But I'm going to ask the question, how many in here read through your Bibles in 2023? That is awesome. I encourage you to keep doing it. And for those of you that didn't get through it in 2023, please make plans to read through it in 2024. Now, one qualifier before I start on this lesson today about being careful when making choices, I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up. In that I will use the words choices and decisions interchangeably today. And for many of you, that's not going to bother you because you do it already anyway. But for some of you that are a little more technical, you may not do that, and I may need a little further explanation, so indulge with me just a second. But a choice is a selection of defined alternatives. You know your choice. You know what your alternatives are, and you've got a choice to make. A decision is broader. But as long as the decision is based on a pre-existing or provided alternatives, a choice and a decision are the same thing. So since everything we're going to be talking about today has known existing alternatives or defined alternatives, I'll be using these two terms interchangeably. And if you're troubled by that, just hang with me till the end, and then we can have some more discussion. Let me start by saying when we're making choices, anybody in here dealing with stress? Some of us dealing with a lot of stress, right? I would suspect that most of us to some degree have some level of stress in our lives. And a big part of the stress that we endure is because of all these choices, all these decisions that we're making every day. And we see that a lot even in our work world. For those of you in the work world, as you get started in your career and you move into different parts of your career, you begin to take on more and more responsibilities, broader scopes, more decisions, more stress. Same thing in school. Remember back in your school days, it's pretty easy being a first grader, not so easy being a grad student, right? Same thing with your marriages and your families. When you were single, you had a certain level of stress, but that level of stress kind of ramped up a little bit once you got married because you picked up some new responsibilities and some new stresses. First child comes along, it ramps up a little bit more. The second one ramps along, it wraps up a little bit more. And I'd say even in this area, going to restaurants, for me, can be a bit stressful. Some restaurants you go to, they give you a novel, right, as a menu. Takes you 30 minutes to decide what you're going to eat, which is often longer than it takes to actually eat. But we make lots and lots of choices, lots and lots of decisions every day. And according to psychology today, we make as many as 35,000 remotely conscious decisions per day. Now, assuming you sleep 7 hours per night, that means about 2,000 decisions per hour, or a decision or or choice every couple of seconds. Those same researchers say we spend about 3 hours per day just deciding what to eat, so they must eat out a lot. Some of those decisions are fairly trivial. When I get up in the morning, do I make coffee or do I get dressed first? What do I wear? Which shoe do I put on first? But some of our choices are pretty significant. Some choices we know right away are life-changing. Some choices we make we don't know are life-changing, but they're building and building and building, and they could eventually become a crossroad-type decision for us. I recently read an article on personal happiness by an individual by the name of Mark Chernoff. And he and his wife Angel have a blog in which they discuss some topics on personal happiness and success and similar topics. And this particular piece was entitled 20 Reasons That Life Gets Way Too Complicated. I'm going to share a few of these and see if any of these sound familiar to you. We try to do too much. We overcommit. Or let me rephrase that. We choose to overcommit. We choose to control too much. We can't let go. We choose to lose our patience, which impacts our attitude and, no doubt, the attitude and patience of those around us. We choose to respond with negativity. And a positive reaction is not necessarily the way things are, they're the way you are. We constantly choose to seek validation from others. And this has been exacerbated somewhat by social media, but this will be a topic we'll cover at a later time. We choose to hold on too tight to everything. When we can't let go of baggage, it's like pushing that rock up a hill every single day. We choose to let haters get the best of us. Again, another one that social media may have a role in. But if you are dealing with haters right now, just keep in mind that most people don't hate you. They just hate where you are in life. And it may be where they want to be. Yes, sir. Yep. Yeah, I was only using this in the context, this is the word that society tends to use today, haters. And I agree with your sentiment very much. We choose to feed into drama, right? How many of us know somebody that's a walking 24/7 soap opera? That drama monster is a big stressor, and we don't need to be feeding it. We shouldn't, but we choose to worry too much. It's a little bit like using your imagination to create something you don't want to happen. And if you think that doesn't happen, just think about it. We run into somebody that's kind of sniffling, and we walk away saying, I don't want to get sick. I don't want to get sick. I don't want to get sick. And what do? We get sick. We choose to spend too much time with toxic people. Now, being here this morning, being in our assembly today is a good break from that. But when you get out in the work world, we do encounter what we call toxic people. And those are people that are causing you to sacrifice your personal happiness and your self-respect. And when that happens, you're going to be stressed. But as I go through this list, are there anything that you see that's a noticeable theme? These are choices. These are choices we sometimes make. So maybe there is something to this thought of being careful with the choices we make. Now some of us, some say, well, let's just hunker down, we'll weather the storm, it'll blow over. Maybe, but maybe not. Check these findings from an article from David Russell Schilling entitled Knowledge Doubling Curve. Until the 1900s, human knowledge was doubling every century. After World War II, knowledge was doubling every 25 years. Today, nanotechnology is doubling every 2 years. Clinical knowledge is doubling every 18 months. The average human knowledge is doubling every 13 months. And according to IBM, with the full build-out of the internet, our knowledge will be doubling every 12 hours. So you really think it's going to blow over? And what's interesting to me as you look at this is that while our knowledge levels seem to be increasing at rapid speeds, is society really getting any smarter? So what's the answer? Paul tells us in his first letter to the Corinthians in chapter 10, I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but not everything is constructive. No one should seek their own good, but the good of others. God did, in fact, give us the power to choose. We have the power to make decisions and choices. We can take the road to the right, or we can take the road to the left. And those choices not only matter to me, but as we talked about last week, they matter to those around us that are watching us. And they matter to those little ones that are looking at our footsteps and following us everywhere we go. So I'll submit to you this morning that my stresses, my complications in life, my Christian walk, my attitude, yours too, all come down to choices and decisions that we sometimes make. And with all due respect to Mr. Chernoff and his 20 ways that life gets too complicated, the Scriptures give us plenty of insights into how to deal with stresses and complexities in this earthly life. And here are just 3 to keep on your heart. Don't be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. If you lack wisdom, ask. God gives generously. And trust the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. You know, a few weeks ago, we looked at some consequences of a poor choice made by Lot. And you remember the story when they were on the mountain together. The herds got too big. Abram gave him a choice. If you go to the right, I'm going to the left. You go to the left, I'm going to the right. We also looked at David making the decision one evening to go out for a stroll, and then the rendezvous that followed with Bathsheba. Both choices led to devastating consequences. But it's not just those 2 examples. The Scriptures are full of individuals that made bad choices with devastating consequences. And I'm going to look at one more this morning, because I don't think you can talk about this ideal of being careful with our choices without looking at old Solomon. A quick recap. Second son of King David, born to David and Bathsheba. Third king and the last king of a united Israel. In 1 Kings chapter 3, the Lord appeared to him and asked him, I will give you anything you ask for. And Solomon's response, give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and distinguish between right and wrong. And God granted him that request. In fact, he was very pleased with the answer he received. And because Solomon asked for wisdom and not riches and power and honor, God blessed him with all those things. And later on in 1 Kings 11, we read that King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, you must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods. Nonetheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. And down in verse 4 it says, as Solomon grew older, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David had been. And if you go down to verse 9, we also read that the Lord was angry with Solomon because he hadn't followed what he had told him. And his response was, I'm going to take the kingdom away from you and give to your servant. And he did. Not in the days of Solomon, but in the days of his son Rehoboam. And you remember the story with Rehoboam, who foolishly listened to his younger counsel and taxed his people foolishly, and 10 tribes broke away. Declared Jeroboam their leader, and there you had the northern and the southern kingdoms. Talk about a roller coaster of life. An individual who had everything, gone from the very top of the mountain to the very depth of the valley. One estimate I read pegged Solomon's adjusted annual income at over $1.1 billion per year. That's incredible. Now, he did have 700 wives, and you know that took some money. But still, that level of wealth is just mind-boggling to me. But fortunately for us, he recognized his mistakes and began to document them. He began to document them to spare future generations of his own suffering and miseries. And after all of the stuff that he went through, and again, we're not talking about just anybody here, right? We're talking about the wisest human, the wealthiest human that ever lived, and his response to all this was meaningless. It is meaningless. So much for this thought, if we just had money and we could buy this, this, and this, we would be happy, right? It's about our choices we make. And you go on and read through the rest of Ecclesiastes, and you see Solomon had been wrestling with this whole ideal of what is the duty of man, and his conclusion, fear God, keep his commandments. Anything less is going to be meaningless. And that's not just coming from some random dude, right? This is a very, very wealthy individual that had more wisdom than any human has known. And it wasn't just Solomon, though, right? We see stories about King Saul. Got a little ahead of myself, but King Saul was another example. Initially, remember when he was going to be the king, he was humble, he feared God, all was good. You can read about that in 1 Samuel chapter 11. If you jump over to 1 Samuel 13 and 1 Samuel 15, you will soon see that he began offering sacrifices that he wasn't authorized to offer, only partially obeying God. And over time, he had poor choices. And when we think of King Saul today, what do we think of? We think of someone that's evil. Which goes back to that thought pyramid we talked about at the very opening of this class series, right? The things you're thinking about are going to come out in words. Those words are going to result in actions. Those actions are become habits. And those habits are become character. And that's what we're going to be known by. And that's what Solomon is known by. So I say all of that to kind of get us to this point here. We are an outcome of our choices. Now, you know I like to use visuals, life visuals to kind of emphasize points. And again, I'm going to do it this morning. But we have simple choices in life, which to me are like those strolls through that familiar neighborhood park or the woods that you're very, very familiar with. You know the path. It's easy to navigate. If you make a misstep, it's easy to just back up, get back on the right track, and off you go. These are insignificant choices. They're not big choices. And at the end of the day, you can take a lot of small strolls around the park and end up right where you thought you were going to end up. On the flip side, though, we have major decisions that we make. And these are a bit like hopping on the old freeways and the Mixmasters. We know the minute we get on them that there's a potential here for these decisions that we're about to make, the choices we're about to take, that could be life-altering. poor road conditions, construction, bad judgment, poor, outdated, or missing signage, uninformed or careless decision by us or by somebody else, all can lead to repercussions and consequences. And sometimes, even when we make a bad choice, it doesn't result in a devastating consequence. Sometimes when we make a bad decision and we miss a turnoff, we can pull it to the side, regain our bearings, get back on track, and off we go again. Sometimes we let pride get in the way, and we don't stop, and we don't ask for directions, and we just carry on uninformed, and who knows where we wind up. So you've got simple decisions in life, and you've got complicated decisions in life. And I say we're the accumulation of all of our daily choices. And while we get caught up in all these choices that we're making, all these decisions we're making, the Bible seems to point to really just two choices. Jesus tells us there is a broad path of the world, but a narrow path if we follow him. We're told that no one can serve two masters. Do we choose to follow God, or do we choose to follow some other master? We can't do both. The book of Joshua closes with the following statement made by Joshua, but it's actually God's sharing thoughts through Joshua. If serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Very simply, you're going to serve God or you're going to serve something else. And prior to passing the leadership torch on to Joshua, God makes this statement through Moses. I have set before you today life and good, death and evil, in that I command you today to love your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his commandments, his statutes, and his judgment. You may live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land which you go to possess. But if your heart turns away, that you do not hear, and are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I announce to you today that you will surely perish. In Romans 6, Paul says this in his letter to the saints in Rome. Do you not know that if you present yourself to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one whom you either obey? Slaves of either sin, which leads to death, or slaves of obedience, which leads to righteousness. So it sure seems to me that we have some pre-existing or provided alternatives in choices. We either choose the broad path, the way of the world, or we choose the narrow path, the way that God has laid before us. We choose to walk in the ways of God, or we attempt to go at it alone or on our own. We choose to serve God, or we choose to serve something else. And if we choose to serve God, we can either obey all of his commandments, or we can do as King Saul did and obey some of his commandments. And if we don't obey all of his commandments, we're not fully committed. And when we only partially obey, we have really chosen others to follow. So are we learning the lessons of what happened to Lot and to David and to King Saul and to Solomon and so many others? And to me, I'll tell you honestly, it boils down to what I read from Paul in 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all for the glory of God. And I submit to you, is it really that simple? Are the choices we make really that simple? whatever decisions you make, whatever choices you make, are you doing it for the glory of God? Think about that for a second. Just think about that. If we make decisions for God and His glory, we honor and praise Him in all that we do, how much less complicated will life be? I want you to think back for a second the last time you made a bad choice in life. Think about it for just a second. Don't need any examples. I just want you to think about it. What drove the decision you made? And my guess is what drove the decision is I'm trying to glorify me. What can I do to help me? Can I please a worldly desire I have? Can I honor self above God? I'm going to ask you to indulge me for a minute because I'm going to share with you some personal challenges that I have faced, particularly as a young dad and father, with some of the choices that I made. And I'm going to share these with you not to put it out there necessarily to share the dirty laundry per se. I'm just putting it out there because I think there are probably some of you that wrestle with the same issues that I wrestled with. And I'll tell you, when I was young, I had a hard time with some of these decisions. It's only until I got to thinking about this that things really cleared up for me. But one of the biggest challenges I faced as a young dad, particularly growing up with young boys who like to play sports, is we got conflicts that take place. Ball games and practices that happen at the same time as worship services take place. What do? Do I make my kid give up his ball game and let his team down? Or do we do what we should do, prioritize God, and come together and worship when we have the opportunities? And it may not just be youth and youth sports. It could be any number of things. You know, that trip we've been waiting for to the lake for a long time, or a golf match that I've been wanting to participate in. And again, I'm not trying to make anybody feel guilty. I'm just saying these are the kinds of choices we make every day, and they're building blocks, so think about it. I also wrestled when I was much younger with time management and finding time to read the Scriptures, to pray, to study. You know how that is, right? You're behind on your daily Bible reading. I've got an hour that I could catch up, but I've sure been wanting to do this, or I've sure been wanting to do that. I need to go do this. I need to do that. It's almost like we find excuses to do things other than pray and read our Scriptures. Another temptation I dealt with as a young father is buying those new big boy toys. And they come with pretty hefty price tags, right? So what gives? Do I have the money to afford that? What do I drop? What do I quit spending money on? Or maybe I take on an extra job to have the time, and I don't have as much time any longer. What gets sacrificed? Did I stress with these decisions? Absolutely. But I think if we come back to this, making choices and decisions that first and foremost glorify and honor God, those decisions and those choices really become much, much easier. And you know, I could stop right here. That's essentially the lesson today. I could stop right here. But I think I've still got some time. I do, about 15 minutes. So I'm going to share with you a few more things I'd like to put in front of you today. Because what I just shared, doing it all for the glory of God, is simple, but it's not simple. Right? There's a lot of pressures and a lot of challenges we're facing. So I'm going to touch on a few of these and just see if maybe I can share some thoughts that might help you, possibly. But one of them is life doesn't slow down. I can make one good decision. Satan doesn't stop. He keeps coming after me time and time again. And it doesn't matter if it's in our work world, a world of hobbies, or a world of school, you can't stand still. You're either moving forward or you're falling behind. The world is passing us right by. If we remain in neutral, we're either going to drift aimlessly and others are going to pass us. That knowledge doubling curve is very, very real. But the same is true in our spiritual life, right? Everything we do either keeps us on the right track or it pushes us off course. Things we do either draw us or allow us to be drawn closer to God, or they're going to push us further away. Every word we speak, every act we do, everywhere we go, everything we choose to do or even choose not to do determines the path we take and the path we're on. And another point is that each decision we make impacts the next one. What we do or don't do today is going to impact who we are or who we become or what we do tomorrow. And an example, the best example I can give you is a little bit like a rocket ship or a missile. You know, we like to think when those rockets or missiles launch, they go right to where they're aimed, but that's not how they operate. There's logic, there's programming in these missiles and rockets that as they go, they're taking in new data, making course corrections, and then going. Making course corrections, and then going. Making course corrections, and then going. Some of those course corrections are really temperature, curvature of the earth, wind conditions. They all come into effect. They're making adjustments to where they go. But that's a little bit like us, right? We make a decision, we get more data, we make a course correction. We get more data, we make a course correction. And unfortunately, in many of our instances, we make a bad decision. And then we spend a lot of time trying to cover up that bad decision or correct that bad decision. And then we say, man, I don't have any time. It might be just easier to make a decision to glorify God in the first place and let things fall into place. Little choices do make a big difference. Prayer time, studying our Bibles, making friends. The friends you make, particularly when you were young, or the friends your kids are making, are impactful, right? Who they make friends with could have an impact a little bit further down the road. Little choices are building blocks. Sometimes we get caught looking for the express line. We have a choice to make, but we're in a hurry. We're looking for the path of least resistance. That line looks shorter. Even if it means we have to compromise a little bit. And one way that applies to us as Christians is we sometimes are willing to tolerate or overlook sin in order to get along, be accepted, or to gain some more personal attention. I think the path of least resistance in our spiritual walk is very real and something we have to deal with. And as Christians, we all know from Scripture that our Christian walk has been defined as a race. And I'm not going to talk a lot about that one today because that's actually our topic next week, is be careful how you run. But each day, if we don't keep in mind God and His eternal purpose, a lot of the stuff we're doing back in here, we're going to get frustrated and lose track and not do it. But as long as we keep our eyes fixed, we can get through it. Similar to running a race, right? All this training you're doing, all this endurance you're building up, the discipline on the meals you're eating and all that kind of stuff. If you're going through that today and you're not focused on the outcome, it's going to be real easy to give up. Quit doing it. Another point in our Christian life that's inevitable is we have to keep putting our faith in action. A good way to think of this one is think of our dear brother Nathan Ingram. And if you've been around him very much, you'll know this is something he's always fond of saying. Just do the next right thing. You got a decision you need to make? Just do the next right thing. You made a bad decision? Just do the next right thing. And I think the Scriptures bear this out. The one-talent man tried to do nothing and was condemned. The church in Laodicea was condemned as being lukewarm. Do not just listen to my word. Do not just listen to the word, but do it. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in the mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. I suspect I'm not the only one in here that's done that a time or two. And if anyone knows what's good and they choose not to do it, that's sin for that individual. And one thing about choices, it's good to sometimes slow down and pray about it, think about it, meditate about it, make sure you have all the right facts and stuff. But we need to be careful not to confuse that with just sitting around and taking no action. Kicking the can down the road is not a good choice. But you have to recognize that when we choose to take no choice, we are in fact making a choice. But you say, making decisions, all these choices are just wearing me out, it's tiring me out, it's making me frustrated, I'm defeated, I want to quit. Maybe if I go back and just hunker down, slip in the background, disengage, keep my head down, bury my head in the sand, things will get better. That's what the world will tell you. Stay quiet and unassuming. Deflect blame. Always blame someone else for your troubles. We do live in a world that tries its very best not to make good and meaningful choices. It's easy to pass the buck and blame somebody else. But old Solomon recognized why we must make a choice, why we can't quit or stay in the background. Because God will bring everything out in the open. Every secret thing will come forward. And we must continually recognize that one day we're going to stand before God in judgment. There is a day coming. On that day, we'll give an account for the way we've lived, the choices we've made, or the ones we've failed to make. This one in Matthew 12 really sticks with me a bit. Every idle word will be accounted for. And I'd suggest to you, if every idle word will be accounted for, is it safe to assume that this might apply to idle actions? And this last one, the lady with the 2 mites. If you need a good example of how even small choices matter, go find this text and read it. I came at you this morning with a lot of information. I threw a lot at you this morning. But I also want you to walk away from here with things being simple. So I'll come back to this one more time. To simplify your life and to make better decisions, simply make choices that bring glory and honor to God, not glory and honor always to ourselves. If you do that, life is going to get lots easier, going to become a lot simpler and less complicated. In all your ways, submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Any comments? Yes, sir. Yeah. Yep, yep. You know, Travis has taken a book out of, I don't see him back there. I saw him earlier. Glenn's page. He stole my thoughts. This is the lesson next week. Good job, brother. And it's true. It's not about us. It's not about us. The problems are not about us. They are, but they aren't. We have to keep fixed on God and His eternal purpose. And if we lose sight of that, we're going to get lost in all this stuff daily around us, and we're thinking, what have I done wrong? What can I do? What do I need to do? What somebody did wrong to me? What? Stay fixed on God and His eternal purpose. Live for Him every day. And if you haven't been doing that, as Travis said, that's hard. That's a hard adjustment to make. But that's what we have to do. And I'm just saying, it's a lesson I learned a little bit later in life. I think if I'd have known that, learned that earlier as a young dad, some things would have been a lot easier for me that I wrestled with in some of my decisions. But I'm just telling you that. I think we make it a lot harder than sometimes we have to. Anybody else have any comments? Yes, sir. Yep. Yep. You know, it's funny. I mean, Ken's sitting right behind you, and he used to say something that always struck with me, and that is, if you want to learn about God, read the Old Testament. And you go back to the Old Testament, and you start seeing some of these stories and these things that they went through, and it's real easy to kind of read them as entertainment, right, as stories. But when you really get down to the core of what was going on, those are the very same issues we're dealing with today. The technology is a little different. A few things are a little bit different. But the same thing they were going through, we're going through today. If you want answers, they're there. You just got to go find them and read about them. And as somebody once said, and I'm not sure who it was, it's you don't have to make all the mistakes yourself, right? Go read about the mistakes somebody else makes, and maybe you can avoid them. Anyway, before we dismiss, let me offer a prayer, and then I'll let you go and enjoy the refreshments.